Reembi kaplo ubats, reenbi logla ishimuleu, reembi dinamit kiche kachikel maya. Translate that. So I introduced myself in my ancestral tongue of Maya Kiche, my name, which is 12 monkeys, translated, and as well the land that I'm from, which is now called Guatemala, but Ishimuleo, the land of corn. And the pueblos that I've been able to speak for and that I've been adopted by are the Quiche Nation as well as the Cachiquel Nation. Why we do that, in part of why I'm going to do, I did it off the top to acknowledge the ancestral gatekeepers and stewards of this land, is that it's a very ancient way, ancestral way of saying we see each other, and I see you, and I see the ancestors here, as well as the ancestors that I carry with me. With that, I am the son of two tribes. I'm the child of one birth. I'm the spirit of many nations. I'm a child of Mother Earth. May these actions serve as a peaceful reconciliation, and may our words serve as to unite as one nation. And I would like to just take a moment to just acknowledge and send a lot of solidarity, truth, strength to our cousins here at the North who are holding it down. Have some relations up right now that are going through that struggle, and that were just released from prison just a few days ago. I couldn't be there with them because I am also choosing to be among my family here as well. But I would just like to send solidarity and support to the nations here. With that, welcome to Las Veteranas. I'm moderator Joe. I'm going to be speaking without the mic because it's theater and fuck that. And I just want to say I'm so honored to be amongst the OGs here. These beautiful, amazing, accomplished artists in their own right. And I just want to preface all of this by saying that this is super important because I'm done with history. We've been spoon-fed, not even spoon-fed, force-fed history. And I'm more interested in herstory, which for me is the divine feminine. It is also a lot of the indigenous, the losers of history. So that's the angle that I'm going to be coming at. I also like to go with the flow, so we're just going to be doing that. And to sort of do away with the traditional way of like sort of doing the bios and stuff like that, I kind of have a question for that's open-ended for all of you, and then you can sort of slip in how you got here and how you've led this. But first, I would like to just introduce everyone. So we have Lina de Guevara. And yes. Evelina Fernandez. Nancy Garcia Loza. Bárbara Santos. Marilo Nuñez. Y Beatriz Pizano. So the opening question is, how has being a creator, and I mean this in all aspects of creation, so being a woman as well, being able to create, how has that liberated you as an artist to this point?
How has being a creator liberated us as artists?
Yes, but we are here amongst you. I don't want to assume anything. You all identify as females?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, yeah, I mean, revolutions are pretty much carried on the backs of women and women of color, specifically as well. So I'm very curious off the top, how being a creator, and I use that term loosely, but more focused as you as all women, how has that liberated you as an artist to be sitting here amongst us all?
It's a really difficult question.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
So, may I start? Yeah? So, I didn't want to start because I was in the other round, and then I want to say what has liberated me is my name is Bárbara Santos, yeah. What has liberated me is discover that I am creator. Yeah, this is the thing, this is the point. It's, because as a woman, you are the one that has to care about everybody, yeah, about everything, about you have to have everything in your shoulder. You learn, grow up, and to take responsibility, to be committed, especially to put yourself not in the first level of your own life. This is the thing. Yeah, as a poor person, is you are teaching, you learn to be consumer of the other's producer because you are not able to produce, you are not able to create. As a child, you know that we are creator. But when you go for socialization, when we go to learn in the school, and they erase for yourself the possibility of a create. And then to remember that you are creator, because you know as a child that you are creator, you are creating things. In the school you learn you are not creator, you have to consume the products created by others. Yeah, you are consumer. And then I think the revolutionary thing is when you are in the social disadvantage, because to be a woman is to be in the social disadvantage. Yeah, to be a black woman is be in the social disadvantage. Yeah, to be a poor is disadvantage. Yeah, so to be convinced that you are not, you cannot, you are not able, and then this is the revolutionary discover. When you discover that you are creator, you have a creativity. Everybody's artist, like Augusto Boal used to say. Yeah, it's like to discover the artist, discover also your citizenship, the possibility of changing reality. When you discover that it's possible to change something, to create something. I told in the other table to imagine. Yeah, this is everything's about imagination. I think this is a big freedom when we discover our potentiality as creator. As a creator didn't bring me here. What brought me here was this discover, and to start. This is really the opening. It's like, wow, I can sing, I can dance, I can write, I can do things because I have the creativity. And these creativities belong to me. Yeah, this is a big discover.
I think what empowered me was that I was created by my creator, my mother. My earliest memory is of my mother reading to me. And my mother had an 8th grade education. She got married when she was 14. She was a single mother, raised 5 children on her own. And she was my storyteller. So she was the person that told me the stories that I never learned in school. She was the person that told me my family history, and she was a great storyteller. So almost everything that I write are rooted in that she told me these stories my whole life. The sad thing is that now she has dementia, and she doesn't remember the stories. So, which makes it even more urgent for me to continue telling the stories that she's told me. And then the other thing that liberated me was the fact that I didn't go to school. You know, I'm a high school dropout. I made my way to college, and then I dropped out of college also. When I went to school in East Los Angeles, it just wasn't a thing. My mother was so busy raising us, working at Sears, that I didn't get any encouragement or discouragement. I didn't get anything. Basically, just lived my life. Hey, go to school, you know, and so I feel like that's liberating, that I didn't have to go to an institution and didn't have to, there were no limitations for me in terms of like doing what I wanted to do. And then the other thing that's liberating was that we created our own company, that we created our own ensemble. Then we empowered ourselves to, if we weren't waiting for anybody to give us permission to do theater, and we just decided to do it. And so those are basically the 3 things that liberated me.
Well, I think that my story it's interesting. As you were talking, I thought, wow, if I'm very truthful, I have to say that my father opened the door for me to be an artist, because he was a painter, and he was a very dedicated artist, and he always was drawing. You know, he was always sketching, always painting. He saw the world through the eye of a painter. So it was completely natural that I would be some kind of an artist. You know, my brother became a photographer. He was also into that career from early childhood. You know, that it was completely natural for all of us. And my mother was a Danish woman, and she was a very brave woman, because she had married this Latin American man in 1925 and come from Denmark to Chile. That was a huge adventure. And she was very, very strong. So, of course, she supported the fact that we were all going to be artists without knowing exactly. You know, art was never something that produces a lot of money. So, anyway, but we didn't think of that. You know, we really, that it was a logical road to follow. I had a little bit of a practical mind, so I also studied to be a teacher of history and geography, so that I could teach. But also, I have to say something terrible. I have to say that my husband has also been very supportive for me to be an artist. Because, well, you know, because he really, I could not work. I didn't have to work for money, you know, because he was an engineer. I'm a bit ashamed, you know. so supported, you know. Yeah. So I have to acknowledge, honestly, that being an artist is very difficult. You know, if you don't have a support, like a strong support like that doesn't question, you know, why don't I go to work and make some money, you know, to collaborate now that we're in this. And my husband was the one that took all our 2 children and our job and our travel to Canada and, you know, creating it. So anyway, I will tell him that I acknowledged in front of a lot of people. I think that will be a good thing for our marriage. Yeah.
First of all, I don't think you should apologize at all, because women have been carrying men geniuses for thousands of years. I'll share an anecdote about someone else's life. I just read a thing with Arthur Miller's wife when she was interviewed after his passing. I don't know if you know this, but she also, she made sure to archive, or sorry, not Arthur Miller, Eugene O'Neill. I'm like, otro vato. So Eugene O'Neill, his wife, a complete dedication to making sure that the genius was not lost to time and memory. And so she reaches out to Yale. She makes sure that all of his letters are archived after his passing. And then when she gets interviewed, she says, I considered it a great honor to do all these things. She's like, it is a privilege to work and toil and nurture a genius and an artist. And then she paused and she goes, I worked like a dog for him. And then it was like, da-da-da-da-da-da. which I mean, a list. It's really brilliant about that because it's like this perfectly stated thing, and then it looks like a checklist of everything you don't want to do on a Saturday. Just, So I have so many responses actually because it's like everything everyone has shared has really sparked something for me. The first thing that I want to say is that I'm like deeply humbled just to be up here to begin with. I'm wearing a very newly minted hat as a veterana, but I've been doing this less than 10 years. So first, confession. Thank you, Carmen, but it's hard to think of myself that way, right? But I think when it comes to mothers, my mother was my first storyteller, and so were my tias and my abuelas. My grandparents, only one of them learned to write, and another one of my grandparents learned to write as an adult because his children started coming north, and he wanted to be able to write letters. And so I remember being a little girl and finding the papers where back then it's like my family straddles Chicagolandia, all the way Boyle Heights, too. I have a whole side of family that also, I can still go to Boyle Heights and look at the same orange tree that my great-grandmother stared at, but mostly in the Midwest, right? And so I remember like finding the letters, and I'm like, words are really precious. For one, I'm like, the written word has been, my family has been deprived and disadvantaged generations from that word. So my family is from Jalisco, which is like, I loved what you said about land of corn. Jalisco is often known as this land of agave, right? It's like this cultural exportation of what is Mexico. People sometimes say Jalisco is Mexico, which is it's also a very brass and very unjust thing to say, because there's a really, really terrible history in Jalisco of the enslavement of both African people and indigenous people. And my family, like, I've been ripped of history. I know that there are Huichol communities where I'm from, but I know that my family was born into the same farms and worked in the same farms for generations. I lived to actually meet the people that worked at the same farm, that were born into the same systems 4 generations back. And it wasn't until my grandparents' generation that, again, one of my grandfathers learned to write, and he learned to write because he ran away from an abusive home at the age of 12 and pretended he was 16 to work as a bracero in the United States. My other grandfather learned to write letters home to the kids north. And all that said, my favorite storytellers were still the women in my family, still the women. But for me, I think it's like that coming to of like being able to acknowledge, like, how am I a creator and what is my role in this? The first thing was really, I think, like wrestling with what Bárbara was saying, which is coming to terms with when I walk into an artistic space, I started to like stop raising my hand to do everything that wasn't the art making. Because for the first, while I have not been doing this for a long time, because I didn't go to school for it, and I'm self-taught, which really just means a lot of community members taught me, right? That's fancy talk for, it's not a degree, but a lot of people invested a lot of time and resources in me. Anyway, so, oh my God, where was I? Se me fue la onda. Anyone help me? With what you were saying, it's like I just remember being like, I have all of these things that tell me when I walk into a room, I have to be there to fix or take care of or solve a problem. And so 4 years ago, I really did make a commitment, supported also by loved ones in my family, to just say, you know what, it's okay to walk into the room and be the creator, because none of us are in this room to begin with if nobody's writing the plays. And we all know that we are not here to write the plays about George Washington, like neta, right? So I mean, you go to Spain and you see a thing and you're like, oh, Velázquez painted this, and you're like, ay, pues qué bonito. I want to talk about that woman that's like squinting really angry behind some güero that she painted, So for me, it's really just I'd say 4 years ago, beginning to the awakening, but that's never se acaba, ¿verdad? And 2 years ago, really committing to being like, generationally, I am right now in the second generation of my family, maybe 2.5 generation of people even being able to write down words. And so that's a tremendous responsibility. My mom gets worried because I don't have children, and she looked at me one time very heartbroken, and she goes, pero Nancy, puse todo en ti. And that I realized that she's very afraid that things will go away. And I just say, no, but it's not going to go away. No más que no va llorar, it's like let the plays do what progeny won't. All right, thank you.
Oh wow, okay. Phew. I don't understand the question yet, but that's good not to, not to know. Many years ago, I have all these friends over for dinner, and they have one of them, one of my best friends, her 6-year-old, suddenly stops the dinner and says, "I want to be a free woman like Bea," referring to me. And of course, my ego felt like, wow, yeah. And the next thing, then 5 minutes later, she says, "Bea, you got to face your fears." This is a 6-year-old girl. There are two things I love in my life right now. I don't know what liberation is, but I love creating, and I love being a woman. And I love right now, at this point of my life, taking no shit, or trying to take no shit. And the caring, I chose not to have children. That was a very, very conscious decision for me. Yet I care about a lot of people, but for me, the most beautiful journey that creation has given me is trying to figure out what a woman is. Because I don't want to be given absolutely no definitions by anybody. I don't buy into definitions of any kind. That's my wild horse nature.
I think my moment of liberation, and I for a long time I didn't want to admit this, and I think just recently I've started to, was actually becoming a mother. For a long time I didn't want to be a mother because I just wanted to create my work. I wanted to just be an artist because I knew that becoming a mother I would have to sacrifice my work. But becoming a mother, like when I had my first daughter, I stopped writing, I stopped creating my work because all of my energy was going into creating her. And then to look at the world through new eyes, to look at the wonderment that children have, and looking at her and saying, wow, I created that thing, this creature here. And now they're grown up, and now I have freedom again, and now I've started to actually start to care about my work and invest in my work. And then I created a company in all of this, in the middle of this. I created this company out of anger. I was very angry at a system, and I wanted to fix that system. And so I created my company in order to create opportunities for people that look like me. And I gave everything to that company, everything. I even sacrificed time with my children for this company. And then I burnt out, and then I couldn't do it anymore. And I think I had a liberation in closing down the company and in saying, you know what? I need to be a bit selfish now. I need to stop only giving opportunity to other people, as much as I loved to do that. And so then I turned to my husband and to my children, and I said, I'm going back to school. I'm going to get my MFA, and I'm just going to write plays. So for 2 years, that's all I did. I just wrote plays for 2 years. And my husband was very supportive, so I do have to say that my husband is also a supporter of the arts. He's an artist himself, but like together, we created these 2 beautiful girls and the ability to create art. And so there was liberation in going back to school and just giving myself the time to create work, my work. Yeah.
And sorry, I started off with that question purposefully as well, because if we look at colonization, patriarchy, that lens, we've suppress the divine feminine, that sexual kundalini yoga that is creation. And now that we're embracing womanhood as well in the divine feminine, it is a choice. But you still have that creator, you had the choice to create physically or through this other way, right? And I think colonization, and I'm not going to speak for all men folk, but I think it's a lot to do with that envy of not being able to procreate, which is why we've, in so many ways, oppressed our sistren, our mothers, and things like that, right? So I wanted, and I chose the word liberate as well, with regards to sort of done of like cry, oh, let's cry a river, like it's, yeah, we know the abuse and the violence and all of that other shit, which does affect, and not to say like to throw that, but I think it's time that we celebrate and that we enjoy, right? So that's why I wanted to go there. So thank you very much for opening up with that and speaking from that. All of you sort of touched on this, and I'd like to direct my first question to you, Lina, with regards to this. People doubt you when you're doing things that you never could. And so as the foremother of, I want to say, this may be a big title, of Canadian theater, right, within the Latinx diaspora. When was your biggest doubt as an artist?
My biggest doubt? What do you mean?
Doubt.
Oh, doubt, sorry. Yeah, my biggest doubt. Sorry, my biggest doubt. You know what happened to me was I was very lucky because I came to Canada and I was thinking, what do I do now? You know, like how am I going to continue my career? I talked, I remember we were living in Toronto that time, and I met a few immigrant artists who said, no, we had to forget about that dream, you know, and that you know, forget about that dream, I cannot, you know, I was very, very scared. And I did try other things. I was teaching children, and I learned a lot from the children. You know, they were wonderful in teaching about creativity, and I did different things. But I did not feel that that was exactly what I wanted to do. And then when I attended a conference in New York, a theater conference, I think it was the first Theater of the Americas conference. And there I met Augusto Boal, you know, was one of the workshops with Augusto. And it was very illuminating. And the other one was with a woman who had a company in Jamaica. She had worked, she was a Canadian woman, and she had lived in Jamaica, and she had worked with these women in Jamaica who were very poor, and they had so much to say about their lives and to claim and so on. And then she worked with them on theater so that they could express what they felt, and she created a company there that was called Sistren. And you know, it was a time where there were no videos, so I just heard her talk about this, and very, very strongly, and I was very inspired by that, and I thought, I can do the same thing. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to get, because I lived in Victoria, and I was the only Latin American actress in Victoria, so I could not create a play with somebody else, and doing a one-woman show didn't attract me at all. So I came back from that conference very inspired, and then I got a grant to do this, and I got support from the Belfry Theatre to apply for the grant. So the Belfry Theatre is one of the main, the only theatre in Victoria that's, at that time, it was the only one that would be interested in supporting something like that. And that was the way that Puente was born, from me working with those women. They really helped me to fulfill what I wanted, and I managed to convince them that they also wanted. And they really wanted to tell their lives, to talk about themselves, and to be appreciated. by what they could give to Canadian society, because it's very humiliating. One of the humiliating things about being an immigrant, especially when you come and being not only an immigrant but sometimes a refugee, you have to be so grateful and you have to be humble and you don't know whether you have any value, you know. So that was very, very stimulating. And that was the beginning of Puente, you know. So the doubt, you know, I did not, I thought they were so wonderful. I did not doubt that they were going to do well. You know, they were so keen on telling their stories because they had suffered a lot. You know, there were 3 of the women. One was from another woman from Chile. They were all, and the other were one from Guatemala and from El Salvador. They were all women that had been in countries, no, sorry, not Guatemala, Nicaragua. They were all from countries where they had suffered a lot. So they were strong. They were strong women. They had survived. So they would survive very well doing a play. That was nothing for them. So anyway, that was the way it started. And from there, all kinds of other things developed.
I just wanted to read this really quickly, and then I have a question for it. When we make images and metaphors, we can reveal the sound of silence. Silence is a really deep issue for women's oppression. There are lots of things they are silenced by. Saving the family, saving family relations. It's related with shame. It's related with guilt. Theater helps a lot to hear the silence, to see the image of the silence. Theater is a really good way to become conscious, to see things that we are not able to see, to listen to things that we don't hear anymore. I think this is the role of theater, to help us see reality. Do you still stand by that?
Yeah, before going for that, I want to back for the thing of being a mother. Yeah, if you give me a chance.
Oh yeah, this is all you.
Because, you know, I'm a mother, but my experience is like the majority of the women in this world have to give up a lot to be a mother. To be a mother is not the paradise. It's a lot of suffering. It's a lot of, giving up. A lot of women is like in the prison. And then maternity is romanticized a lot. You know, it's this romantic image, but in the reality has a lot. You know, I think we have to be aware. Not every woman has a chance to have a good experience. A lot of us has a good experience. For me, was like, my son was the guy that went with me for trade unions for 6 months because I decided that I want to do everything in my life because I didn't want to tell him, like my mother told to me, that she gave up a lot to growing up, have 5 children. I didn't want to give up a lot. And I think this creation as a beauty, as a beauty is true, at the same time for women is prison, is not a good experience. Just for we don't romanticize this thing. What I say in this interview about the silence, because women, to carry on the life or to take care, is we have to silence a lot, yeah? And the silence is a horrible thing because when you silence something, it's so difficult for you to overcome because this is silenced. This is one box, yeah? And of course, when you leave something in the box long, you don't have courage to back for the box. You know what, if you just take something and put inside of the box and close the box, we'd be really dirty. We not smelling good. I would say, I'm used to say for women that consciousness is ugly and have a not good smell. Because normally consciousness is the moment that you open something and you look at it. It's like when you look at sheet. It's not that a more beautiful experience, yeah? But this is like consciousness is that when you open your eyes, you cannot close anymore. In the end, you start to see everything, yeah? Because that we say, when we are not conscious, we can just go. But when we are conscious, is the difficulty. What in my work, what I try to do, it's really important, the first step, to recognize. Sometimes I have to recognize I am victim of the reality. Yes, like a victim of violence, a victim of several things. But I cannot be in the place of victim. I have to see my strength as a survivor. Yeah, like you told, when we discover that we are survivor, we discover that we are oppressed. Oppressed in the sense that we use, oppressed in the sense that somebody that is facing a struggle, but is facing the way of looking for a possibility, looking for how can I overcome it. And then the stage of come for the victim, of survivor, is a really big step. And then I am the oppressed. And as an oppressed, I can be activist. Yeah, it's like, but I have to be able to walk, but I'm not able to walk alone. This is the thing, it's like to face silence we have to face silence together. It's so hard to hear the silence when you are forced to silence. When you silence because your choice, because you want to hear the silence, is a beautiful experience. But when you are forced to silence, it's really hard to, to live with it. And to go out is really important to see the silence that you experience is not only yours, it's ours. Because if you go in the room with a woman and the woman starts to tell something, the other women's going to recognize it. Because this individual experience is not private, it's really collective. We all can understand it. This is the experience that I are talking about. This is actually my work.
A lot of men folk too, in the United States and that type of stuff, they're like against the LGBTQ pride marches, or they're like, oh, why is it all female spaces, or why is it this, or some blatantly just flat out go like with diversity in that issue too, like, oh, you're taking away jobs, like what does it matter, just go, but they don't understand that type of oppression. And the type of oppression that I've gone through is very different because of my male privilege, right? So thank you for that. And I'm curious then too, how much for the rest of you, working with women affect your work in that way? Do you consciously do that, or is it a community thing? You don't really focus on that, or yeah? What's your? I'm looking at you right now, so I'll go with you, Nancy.
I think again, I want to answer this and really in response to what Bárbara was sharing. I noticed that women were saying a lot when it was only women in my family. And so then I started to recognize when and where the silence happens when they were in a public space. As an example, I remember living in an apartment on the southwest side of Chicago, and my mom said, "Mira, Nancy, Don Ramiro's gonna come. He's gonna look at this bathroom." And then she showed me her hands, and they were completely cut from the rust on the faucet. And then she said a bunch of expletives, and she told me everything that she thought of that man. I mean, she poured it out, and I was like, okay, because my mom, she didn't swear a lot, so it really meant something when it happened. And then she's like, don't say anything. But then, and I'm like, but why? Like, we pay rent. And she's like, no, don't say anything, because your grandfather owes that guy a favor. When this neighborhood was all white, that he was the only guy from our pueblo, and he rented to your grandfather like 20 years ago. And I was like, well, it sounds like he paid rent too. I hope his faucets were fine. And so then he came in, and my mom said that I was about 4 years old, and I read him. I told him everything she said. And she said she just grabbed me, and she like ushered me away, and she was like, Nancy, I just wanted the earth to eat me. And I was like, why that weight? And I think that's like, why would you rather be swallowed by the earth for saying something true, and saying something is basically really taking a stand to tell someone, stop harming me or stop taking advantage of me. So I think for me, like the seed of my plays, it really often is, it's that image, right? It's that image of like a memory of witnessing what my mom might have said only to me or my grandmothers, and they never said it anywhere else. So for me, it's very precious when a woman in my family accidentally or without calling it, se les sale un secret. That for me is always like, and what's a play besides a combination of a sound and silence? That's the dance with a play, right? playwrights, we're trying to be musicians. That is the composition of a play, ¿verdad? So that's, to me, that's the approach in the work.
Okay, and so following that and going to the artistic, and because I apologize, the show that I just recently saw, aside from Carmen's, would have been Bea's, Solitudes. So, I'll let you explain that, but the question would be, off of the top, this is a protest, was the artist's message, right off the top of what you said, off of that, right, like unabashedly there. So, working with, I believe, it's an 8-hander? 8 other all-female cast, and I believe most of all of the creative crew as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, was an intense experience. It was a collective creation, and I've been inspired very much by one of my great mentors is Patricia Ariza from Colombia and La Candelaria Theater, and their approach to collective creation. And I had been dying to really apply that in Canada, where collective creation really has the requirements of having, as Santiago Garcia would say, a permanent space, a permanent group, and the audience. 3 things that we often cannot have here. So we were very lucky to get, this is the thing. We got a new chapter grant, which sounded wonderful, and it was to celebrate Canada's 150 years, but nobody wanted to celebrate 150 years of Canada. And so they quickly changed their way of talking about the grant, but they also was the first time that they didn't allow extensions for a grant. It was all this crazy stuff, but I was very fortunate because it was the closest I came to having an ensemble that I could work with. We worked over a year and a half. And of course, my dream was to have them committed for a year of paid salary. We couldn't do that. But we met quite a bit. And it was a piece inspired by Marquez's 100 Years of Solitudes, The Women. I was not interested in the men's story, not because I have anything against it, it's because I have written extensively about the war in Colombia. That was how I entered as a playwright. I don't call myself a playwright, I am a writer-director, because I basically write so I can direct my plays. And I was my obsession to write and about women, and it's not because I say I'm going to write about women, but it was my experience in the war in Colombia that was the people I was talking to. And so I was very inspired rereading the play, the novel, about how the stubbornness of these women, and it was that solitude that allowed them to survive the world of men and war. So we departed from that, and I wanted to bring 8 women that I admired. That was my first thing, women that I really admired, that could create, because it's also the first play that I write that I did not write, because all the words I respected, I understood the process was revealing itself, that I had to respect the words those women have written, which they didn't write. For the first time, I recorded the entire year and a half. So I had over 500 hours of video. All the conversations that happened after the improvisations actually became the piece. So I transcribed those 500-600 hours. I don't transcribe exactly word by word. And from there, start creating that piece. And working with women the grant allowed me, I also went, first of all, women don't get great roles in this country. Only 3-4 women work and get great roles. I wanted the stories to come from them. It was their lives. I'm very much about telling the truth. That's the theater I'm interested in. So I'm departing more from dramatical structures. I'm more interested in truths. And the performer having the guts to reveal themselves, because I think that's where a lot of the protest begins. You having the guts to reveal you. Don't talk to me about how the world should be. Talk to me about the I, because I think the I is extremely political. And in the I, we can find the commonality. Because I'm not telling it, the moment I tell somebody how to do something, I'm done. Like I've lost you. You know, like when I hear that, I go, whoa, I'm a rebel. I won't. Don't tell me how things are. So, but the process was also give them the chance to bring these great masters to train the ensemble, because women don't get that chance. It's expensive to go and train with all, you know, around the world. I have had the benefit because I did, but I would travel to great master classes and that, but we would be the only ones. So my dream was to train these women, bring these great artists to the collective to train, not to as production, but to train. We created something that for me is very special. I'm very, that piece has been very special. And it was working with women and revealing yourself to that extent was also a very, very challenging process in the room. There are a lot of things that come up, and they're hard. They're really hard emotionally. So I realized how much pain is carried in our bodies, in our collective unconscious, and I wanted a piece that was about a lot of hope, because that's I'm only interested in that, in action of, you know, doing something and hope. And, but so I don't even know where I'm going now, but I learned so much. It just, doubt. I couldn't sleep for 6 months. I was terrified since 4 in the morning. You know, it was huge. It was a huge responsibility for all those women on stage as well. There was not a single lie on that stage. Not a single lie. Nobody pretended to be a character. That was not allowed. And so it was very magical. And it's the silences, I'm very excited about what women can say. Very excited.
I have ADD, so like I'm gonna throw this out there, and we're gonna go back to one of them. One is artistas rebeldes, right? Like that's, I mean, todos ustedes, right? Right. So I have that question. Actually, we'll go there because I forgot the other one. And Evelina, I want to start off with you actually. What do you think about Latinx, nuestra diaspora, that makes us rebelde? I see everyone here, and I know these two, but the energies that Bárbara, Lina, Nancy, and them two over there give me are like and you're like this reserved, like fire. So I'm very curious. What do you think, or in your own path, starting up what you did, what do you think that makes us?
First of all, I think like I'm having a moment right now because I didn't like your first 2 questions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I felt like you were asking us about doubt. You know, you were asking us about things that were fearful. You know, as women, how did you suffer? And I'm just like so tired of that. And that's probably why you see me going, oh my God, this guy, but. Let's put that aside. Because as a man, we're having a different experience. Maybe you guys will agree with me or not, but as a male moderator, I'm feeling like I'm having a whole different experience. And it's nothing about you, because I think everything you're saying comes from a very good and honest place, but it made me uncomfortable. So that's probably why you see me going, ay, ay, ay. But let me say that I have no choice but to be an artista rebelde. I mean, it's nothing that I chose to do. It's just that I have no choice, because that's my reality. That's that's my life. This is, you know, in order to do my art, I have to fight for it. I have to fight to do it every single day. Just like I'm sure every single one of us up here, we've always had to fight to do it. It's not easy. We don't come from privilege, you know. So, and on the other hand, when you started asking about doubt and stuff like that, because I'm an artista rebelde, I've never used that term before, but now I am. I never had any doubt. I was trying to think about what are my moments of doubt, you know, and again, I think it goes back to me not going to the university, me not being educated in the traditional way. So I never felt any doubt. It was always just about moving forward. And also because I come from the Chicano movement. And the Chicano movement is about, you know, being an activist. And it's about fighting for social justice and for fighting for your rights and, you know, being a voice for the voiceless. So that's the only reason that, you know, I do theater. Because I've fought for it, and I have no choice but to be rebellious. I have no choice. It's the only way I can do theater. I mean, I don't work in the regionals. I don't. I have no desire. I got this TCG grant. The TCG is a theater communication group in Los Angeles, like a big umbrella organization of all the theater companies. Basically, it's for the regional theaters, because even though we're members as an independent, I don't even know why we're members. You know, we pay the dues, but you know, to go to the conference or whatever. But I did get a grant, and so you know, when I got this grant, you know, they met with me, TCG, and they were like, you should go to New York and meet with, you know, the artistic directors there at the theaters. And if you want, I'll set up the meetings, right? And I was like, you know, Emilia? Yeah. So I was like, okay. So I went to New York, and she set up all these meetings. And so they were like, so you want to do your plays in New York? And I was like, I guess. I mean, oh. I mean, if the opportunity, you know, came up, I would say yes. But it's not something that drives me. It's not something that really, that's not why I do theater. I do theater for my community, for in my city, for my people, for our audience. Because they need to see themselves on the stage, especially young people. You know, we have these student matinees, and you'd be surprised how many of these young people have never been to the theater, you know, in their lives. You know, it's really hard for them to turn off their devices for 2 hours, right? And sit there and then to have a talk back with them. So it's, you know, it's really, really important for them to come and see themselves and hear their stories. And I don't know where I was going with that. And I feel really bad about what I said right now. But should I feel bad? I mean, didn't I say what I'm feeling? And so as a woman, like now I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that to that young man. See?
So, yeah.
I know. It's so typical, right? Now I'm thinking, oh, you know, I don't want to affect his confidence.
You have to take care about his feelings.
I know. Now I'm worried about him. That's so bad.
His feelings is so important.
Yes, it's doubt. Thank you. I'm having a moment of doubt. I'm sorry.
In the realsies. No,
But doubt is powerful, man. There's a difference. I think words are very confusing because doubt is powerful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's when you get up with that doubt and you go, fuck it. I'm not, you know, so that's the fire. Yeah.
Muchísimas gracias for your honesty and your transparency. That's what it's all about, first off. The second thing is like there's also a generational divide. I understand that I identify as they as well, but I understand that I'm the only male up here, right? And there's also a generational thing. I'm only 32, right? So within that, I do work within communities. The reason why I asked doubt is because Achpop in Maya Quiche are what the Spanish called our kings in queens. We didn't have that. We didn't have empresses. We didn't have any of that, right? We had Achpop, community leaders. And that's what the type of work that I do, that I know those two works intimately. So I know, right? And that's what you have just touched upon as well. And so for me, I use that term doubt because I'm in my own personal journey. And again, being up here amongst all of you is an honor. And I truly mean that. So I go, hey, I now have a responsibility to my community. I've been called up here from Toronto to be a part of this, to go back to speak for my pueblo as well, right? And so that doubt that I'm going through personally is what I wanted to hear about my foremothers going, fuck it. Fuck it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is what we're doing. Fuck the doubt. Fuck all the haters. I'm going to do me. And sometimes, most of the time, you only have that to do, right? So thank you. And again, I like to know where everyone's at, so thank you very much for that. And thank you again for, like, even trying to console me. I'm going to go call my mom and write a poem about this, but, like...